Hello everyone, this is Professor Robert Solis. Welcome to this video lesson. We're going to continue talking about the C++ repetition structure, and what we're going to talk about are two additional repetition statements that are used in the C++ language. So let me switch over here to Visual Studio. We are already familiar with the while statement, and the while statement is simply a statement that repeats over and over and over again until some given condition is met. In this particular case, as long as the counter is less than the user number, we're going to keep on repeating this loop body that is defined by this curly braces and also this closing curly braces. Okay. Now, there are two other repetition structure statements that we can use in C++, and one of them is the for statement, and it works very similar. There's a starting value, there's a condition to be met, and then there's also how are we going to increment or decrement to the next value. So we call this the for statement. And then we also have another looping statement called the do statement. And so the do loop, what that does is it repeats over and over and over again until some condition is met. But there's a difference between these three. So before I describe that difference, let me just go into a little bit more detail about the for statement and also the do loop. All right, so in this case, the for statement works like this. Notice over here that for the while statement you have a starting value. Well, here is that starting value here. And then there's a semicolon. The next block or the next section of the for statement is the condition or the Boolean expression. Well, that's the same thing as the Boolean expression within the parentheses for the while statement. And then finally, you have how is the value going to, or how is the counter going to increment or decrement? And in this case, that's listed here. So what the for statement does is it consolidates part 1, 2, and also part 3 all together in one line of code. So what this does is it indicates what is the starting value of the counter? How is the counter going to continue? What is the Boolean expression, I should say? That's the middle portion, again, after the semicolon. And then finally, after this last semicolon, how does the counter increment or decrement to go to the next value? So everything is in one line. So the for loop is really cool in that everything is consolidated as opposed to the while statement where we have items that are broken up into 3 different locations. All right, as long as this condition is true, it looks like we're going to output the value of count, and then we're going to output a space, and we just keep on doing this over and over and over and over again. All right, when we're finished, we output the result. Let's talk about the post-test loop structure, specifically the do loop. Now, the way that the do loop works out is this. You are guaranteed to run the code, the loop body, I should say, at least one time. So first we are going to assign count to 0. Then we are going to do this loop body. Well, what are we going to do? We are going to output the value of count and a space. We are going to increment count, and now we're going to ask the question, is this still the case? Is it still the case that the counter is less than the user number? Because if it is, then we go back to the beginning of this loop body and perform this again and again and again as long as this is true. All right, so that's how the for statement and that's how the do loop work. Let's now talk about this issue of pre-test versus the word post-test loop. All right, going back to our while statement, we call this a pre-test loop because, in other words, what's happening is we are testing to determine if the condition is true, and if it is, then we go ahead and execute the loop body, which is defined right here after the curly braces, before the curly braces. So it would be analogous to you say you go to a dance club, right? And they want to check your age because only people who are 21 and older can enter into the club. Well, there's a bouncer at the front, and the bouncer says, hey, how old are you? And give me your license, because they want to verify. If you've passed the test of you are 21 or older, guess what? You get to go into the club. That's what this thing is doing. This is a bouncer asking you a question. Has this criteria been met? Because if it has been met, then you can enter into the loop body and execute. The same thing exists for the for statement. The for statement is also a pretest loop. And in other words, we're first going to initialize count to 0 in this particular case. We don't have to initialize it to 0. We can initialize it to everything, to anything rather. But as long as this is met, then we can enter into the loop body. If it's not, then we don't even enter into the loop body once. So we test, pre-test, we test before we enter into the loop. That's how the while statement, that's how the for statement work. Now there may be times in your programming endeavor that you will need to execute the loop body at least one time and then make a determination of whether or not you're going to continue a second, third, fourth, so forth and so on. And that's what a post-test loop does, and that would be the do loop. So the way that the do loop works is as follows. You are going to do the following instructions. You are going to enter into the loop body, and here's the loop body. We're going to output onto the console the value of counter and also a space, and then we're going to increment counter. Now, the last thing to do is to test. So notice that this is at the very end of your do loop, the while statement. Now notice also the placement of a semicolon. This is unique with the do loop. You would normally not place a semicolon at the end of a while statement, but in this context you do. And so what we're doing is we're testing this after. In other words, the word post is relevant here. You are testing this after you have executed the loop body. And you're asking the question, is counter less than user num? Because if it is, then you're going to do the loop body again. But do you notice that we executed the loop body at least one time? And by doing that, we are now asking the question, shall we do it again? And here's that question right here. Shall we do it again and again and again and again, so forth and so on. Okay. So that is how the post-test loop works. You will execute it and then ask a question. Let's run this program to see what it looks like. So I'm going to execute it. All right, enter a whole number. I'll enter the number 4. Okay, so notice that all three of these looping structures, go back over here, so we have the while statement, which is also a pretest loop. It's displaying the numbers 0 through 3 because counter starts off at 0. As long as 0 is less than the user number, well, the user number, as you can see here, is the number 4. All right, so is 0 less than 4? Yes. So then counter increments by 1. So counter is now 1. Is 1 less than 4? Yep. How about 2? 3? Yep. Those are less than 4. Now how about 4? Is 4 less than 4? No, it's not. So therefore we are finished with the while statement. So that's how come you only see 0, 1, 2, 3. All right, if I were to go down over here now to the for statement, back over here so I can show you the output. If I go to the for statement, we reassign counter to 0. We ask the question, is 0 less than the user number, which is 4? Yes, it is. So therefore, we're going to output the value of count. Well, what is the value of count? At this point, it's 0. So that's where that 0 here on the second line appears. And then we're going to output a space. We go back to the for statement and we increment the counter by 1 and then ask the question. Is 1 now less than the user number? Yes, it is. So we print it out. Okay, now we go back over here. Counter is now 2 because it's being incremented. Is 2 less than the user number? Yep. 3 less than the user number? Yep. How about 4? No, 4 is not less than 4. So therefore we are finished with the for statement and we output to go to the next line. And so that's, now the cursor would be blinking over here at this third line. All right. Over here in this do loop, this post-test loop, do loop structure, counter is set to 0, and we are going to execute the loop body. What are we going to do? Output the value of counter. That's 0. Well, here it is. All right, output a space. Here's that space. Increment the value of counter by 1. So counter was 0. Now it's 1. Is 1 less than 4? Yes, that's the case. So go back and do this loop body again. Output 1 and a space. There it is, 1 and a space. Counter is going to be incremented by 1, so it goes from 1 to 2. Is 2 less than the user number? Yep, 2 is less than 4, so we do this. How about 3? Yep. How about 4? Okay, so this is going to be displaying the number 3 and an output, output a space rather. Counter is not going to go from 3 to 4. Is 4 less than 4? No, it's not. So we do not loop anymore, and we simply output, go to the beginning of the next line. That's what endl is, so we go to the beginning of the next line. And that's it. So that is a quick description of the for loop, the do loop, in comparison with the while loop, which is something we've already discussed. But more specifically, you have now an ability to test something before you run the loop body or test something after you've executed the loop body. And that's what we call a pre-test loop or a post-test loop. And that's it. All right, so this is Professor Robert Solis. I hope this video lesson was helpful. Have a good day. See you next time.